Good evening, and welcome to the happenings in Medfield. Medfield had the opportunity of sitting with Selectman Richard DeSorgher, Medfield Press with Mac, to discuss many areas within Medfield by the Selectman's point of view. There's a number of things that, as you may know, both you gentlemen are aware of. One in particular, the state hospital. The situation existing is that there has been many questions relative from the populace here in Medfield as to what is happening, because this has gone on for a good length of time. And so now it's to a peaked point. I had the opportunity, as you may know, with Richard DeSorgher and Bill Morrow in a program that we were discussing the state hospital. And so once again, because of the urgency of the situation that is existing, there's many questions. And Richard DeSorgher, as you know, has been able to answer, and the press has written. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Richard DeSorgher and the press, and we take it from there. Richard?
Thanks, Jack. And maybe we'll start with the hospital, because I think that probably is the most important issue, clearly the most important issue, I think, right now on the table, and probably one of the most important issues that this town, the decision, will face. As you know, on March the 10th, we have a special town meeting called at the Medfield High School auditorium. Starts at 7:30, and the issue will be, basically it comes down to, will the town of Medfield purchase the campus area and the land across the street, the so-called Sledding Hill area, which comprises about 134 acres of land. Will the town purchase that for $3.1 million, and then the town take control of that? Or if that is defeated, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts will keep control of that land, and then the Commonwealth of Massachusetts will look for development, and they will be in charge of what's going to happen up there. So the way I look at it, it comes down to, does Medfield want to make that decision, be the keeper of its own house, so to speak, or allow the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to make that decision, whatever that may be. In addition to the March 10th special town meeting, we then, if it does pass, they would then go to a vote, a townwide vote, and we're going to add the one question will be added to the March 31st annual town elections, where all our town officials are elected. And so in addition to voting for the town officials, there will be a one question. Again, that has to pass, whether the town will purchase the former Medfield State Hospital property or not. So it has to pass by a 2/3 vote at town meeting, and then it has to pass by a majority vote of the ballot. And again, the voting takes place at the center down on Ice House Road. Polls will open at 6 in the morning, and they close at 8 in the evening. So that clearly is the biggest issue I think we're facing right now.
Question, Mac, to the press. I know that you people have been covering this situation. What's your opinion?
Well, I am strongly in favor of the town purchasing the land. I think that they really should have control over it. It's a lot of land, so a lot of potential for development. And yes, $3 million, a lot of money certainly. And I do recall when the town was voting on the purchase of Reggae Farm, there was a lot of debate about, do we have the money? Can the town really afford this? I think the town really has to purchase the hospital land, because I don't think that the people want to see this put in the hands of someone else. They want to have control of the land and what happens to it. And I think it's a great opportunity to further develop the town and to get the kinds of businesses, organizations, and structures there that that the town wants to see. So I strongly encourage purchasing the land.
I think Max makes a good point on the whole issue of the economic impact on the tax rate on the town. $3.1 million divided by 134 acres of land is way below what a market value would be here in Medfield.
Sure.
It really is an incredible bargain if you look at buying that land. But $3.1 million, as you said, is a lot of money. Mm-hmm. But if you look, what's the alternative? If the town does not buy that and the state puts in the original plan, as we talked about at the taping you did with Bill Massaro, the original plan was 444 units of housing, but that could be much higher. If you look at Danvers or some of the other hospitals, I mean, you could potentially have up to 1,000 units that are up there. So then, what happens if you get 444 units, or 500, 600, or 700? Clearly, Medfield is a community that is family orientated in the sense that people come here because of the schools. Mm-hmm. We used to be number one up until about 3 years ago, that we had the highest percent of people 18 and under than any city and town in Massachusetts. I think we're about 7th or 8th now, but we're still very high. So people are coming here with children, and clearly, if there's massive housing that takes place, if the state develops that solely for housing, then we're going to have a large number of kids that are going to come into the schools. That's going to mean additional revenue is going to need it for the school budget, for additional teachers, additions to the schools. We'd have to look at that. It also means additional funding for our police, the fire. As you know, that section of the state hospital is in the north end of Medfield, Harding Street, a very windy street. We're going to have to build sidewalks. So there's a lot of additional expense if we have large-scale development that goes up there that's going to come back, and I think is going to be a far greater impact than the $3.1 million. And the other thing, because of this partnership deal we have with the state, that $3.1 million is interest-free. Mm-hmm. So for 10 years. And I know there's a number of issues that the people have been concerned about. A lot of people, want to see open space. Well, no matter what happens, there is going to be open space up there on both sides of the land that we're talking about. And again, it's just the campus area where all the buildings are, and the land across the street, the Sledding Hill area, is the area we're talking about. Again, about 134 acres. But you have all the area on the Charles River, and you have all the area on the other side of the hospital that will remain open. So no matter what, that is going to remain open. The state will still control that. Mm-hmm. And as we talked about at the meeting, just a tremendous job that local Medfield residents, such as Bill and so many others, that worked on the environmental impact that the state was originally going to just leave. And that's another concern. When Medfield has the control, we live here. This is our community, our homes, our kids. I think we know best, and we should be the ones, that call the shot. Quite frankly, as I said before, I think our representatives and our state senator do a tremendous job for the efforts of Medfield. But that's only 3 in the entire Massachusetts House and Senate. And when I go into the State House and I tell them from Medfield, they either say where, or they really could care less. I mean, Medfield is not a high priority. Right now in the state, they're looking to get how much revenue can they get in. The governor has a very ambitious plan for housing throughout the states, and they're more concerned with their agenda than they are the agenda of the town of Medfield. And so we saw on the cleanup, originally when the state was in control, they were basically going to leave the bulk of the waste from hazardous waste to asbestos to medical waste that was down there. They were basically going to leave it there. And it was through the efforts of the Medfield individuals that we now see the plan that basically the state is cleaning up. In fact, it will be one of the largest restoration programs that the Charles River has ever seen. And as Bill mentioned last time, generations from now we're going to look at that site and just be so glad that we made that decision to clean up the Charles. There'll be, canoe launch areas down there. They're restoring the wetlands that's down there. The bulk of the waste is being taken out, and that's just going to be a beautiful area. But when the Commonwealth of Massachusetts had control, that was not the case. So I agree with you. That's what concerns me. If Massachusetts is in the driver's seat versus if we in the town of Medfield are in the driver's seat. So I agree 100% with you.
Yeah.
The most important factor, and I've said this a number of times, gentlemen, voting. To get out and vote. Go to the town meeting, the special town meeting, regarding the situation. It's imperative that you do. As Richard had said, and so had Max, this town is yours. Consequently, treat it that way by voting, talking about it. There's an old adage, talk's cheap, takes money to buy whiskey, and that goes a long way back. And so your participation in your town is very, very important. The selectman can do just so much. The town administrator can do just so much. But the situation and the responsibility of Medfield rests with you and your votes. What else do we have on the agenda, gentlemen?
Well, let me just follow up a little bit because I think
by all means.
Well, Steve Nolan and the Hospital Redevelopment Committee have just done a tremendous job, yeoman's work of getting information, and they will make a presentation at the floor of town meeting to give information. There will be a mailer that will go out to every home in Medfield that the committee will put out, trying to give you as much information as they possibly can. They have a website that you can go on to with a link under the Town of Medfield website as well. So we just strongly urge you to read that mailer when it comes out, to attend town meeting, listen carefully. All sides will be heard. Scott McDermott just does a great job making sure that everything is balanced, so you're going to hear all sides of the issues. And then you, the resident of Medfield, this is your town, as we said, your future and your kids' future, and the future of what Medfield is going to be like from years to come. I believe that this vote is going to really put us on one track or another. So just urge you, as Jack said, to make sure you attend town meeting. And if you need additional information, the committee is ready and able to answer those questions and to help you in any way possible. One other thing with the hospital, which we're waiting on, as you know, which really is a separate issue, but it's still tied with the hospital. As you know, the committee was able to work out just a tremendous deal for the town where we will be receiving land along where the current water tower is located, and an access road coming in, and also what is known as the well fields, which is down along the railroad tracks behind Colonial Road area. And that legislation is going before the state as we speak right now. We had hoped it would be in this week, but we're informed by Senator Timilty that there's about a 2-week delay on that, because what they want to do is just to make sure they want to offer every other state agency that opportunity if they have any need for that land. Senator Timilty feels it's a formality that they have to do that just to make sure everyone had a chance to look at that property. But we should be receiving in about 2 weeks' time that land. As you know, the current water tower is offline. Medfield is operating just on one water tower. That's a real concern. The Water and Sewage Board is very concerned that if anything ever happened to the Mount Nebo water tower, we're in a serious issue here in Medfield. And so They hope this legislation will go through, and then at the annual town meeting, we'll look up the issue of we're going to have to build a new water tower up on that site. But we will be receiving the land at no cost from the state. And that was part of the negotiations that the committee worked out. Just some other issues. The Selectmen at the last meeting voted to form a over 55 housing committee. That clearly, it's been one of my issues, and I know the Council of Aging and many other residents of Medfield want this issue on the burner. As I said before, we lose a lot of great citizens in our community that are over 55 whose kids have moved out or gone off to college. They want to downsize, and there's no such facility here in the town of Medfield. We also have a lot of senior citizens that are on fixed incomes that might own their own home. They want to be able to sell that home and stay here in Medfield, but they can't afford to buy a $1 million home somewhere. So we need to address those concerns, and I think the state hospital property will be a key factor if the town of Medfield does buy that, to look at developing some 55 housing up at the state hospital. But maybe there's other areas as well. Maybe there's other areas. I know next to Tilden Village, there is land, but that's controlled by the state.
Yeah.
So we're a little tied, but there is efforts. I know the Housing Authority is trying to look at ways of getting housing in that area. We have other town-owned property that this committee maybe can look at. What do we need to do on the issue of over 55 housing? So that's underway. We're going to appoint a committee on that, begin to look at that issue. We just had at the last Selectmen's meeting the Lyme disease study committee just reported on their year activities, and it's fascinating the work that they're doing. As you probably know, Medfield has one of the largest percent of deer per square mile of any suburban community in Massachusetts. We're averaging about 28 deer per square mile, and they said the safe level is around 7 or 8. So, we're way over. Medfield also, as a result of that, has one of the highest cases of Lyme disease reported in Massachusetts as well. And so what this committee that was formed back in, I believe, 2010, is beginning to do a controlled bow hunting. And this past year, we had 25 hunters that culled some 41 deer on private property that the owner allows the hunter to put a tree stand. They're all from a tree stand, shooting straight down, or on public land that's in the town. And again, the committee, I just think, does a tremendous job. Two members, Barry Mandel and Frank Perry in particular, just put an awful lot of time. They interview all the hunters. The hunters have to be tested. They have to be registered with the town. And by doing this, what we've found is that we've also been able to identify illegal hunters that are in the town and remove them so that only those with a permit, only those that are tested for safety reasons. But Barry brought up kind of an interesting statistic, and he said when Medfield first started this program back in 2010, Medfield had 59 deer that were hit by cars just on the road. Each year of this program, the number of deer hit by car has gone down. This past year, it was down to 18. So what that seems to be showing, with less deer, there's less deer that are being hit by cars. Mm-hmm. And I know myself, when I drive down Hartford Street, I'm crawling, I'm looking on both sides with fear that, especially at night, that the deer are going to bolt across the street. We've had a number of accidents, people injured, cars damaged with that. So that committee is doing a lot of work. Safety is their number one concern, but they're beginning to cut down on the deer population that's overly populated here in the town of Medfield. So
Well, that's excellent.
I don't know if you've heard anything in the other communities or anything with that.
Well, I also cover Westwood for the Westwood Press, and from what I've seen, they don't seem to have quite as much of a problem. There are occasional reports of deers being hit by cars, but the number does seem to be considerably less, because in Medfield it seems like every week there's at least one report in the police log of a deer being hit by a car.
But it's interesting, Barry said, of the surrounding towns, Dover and Medfield are the two that have the bow hunting program. The other towns that surround Medfield, that border Medfield, their rate of deer being hit on the road is either at its highest or second highest level they've ever recorded. So I think this eventually is going to have to be a regional basis, because deer, of course, don't know border lines and go from one end to another. So I think we're making progress on that. We have an overpopulated deer population here in Medfield, and we also have one of the highest Lyme disease rates. So that committee, I think, is doing a lot of work on that.
Which is important. Our program, as you may know, is sitting with the press and a selectman in reference to many areas. And one thing in particular that has struck not only my interest, but others, the selectmen just don't sit on a night and that's the end of it. They have a lot of work. One in particular, a lady approached me and asked, and she was very happy about it. So I'm going to point it to you, Richard. I understand that you visit people relative to areas in which they're interested in. Could you elaborate as a selectman?
Well, I'm not sure. We do a couple of things. Perhaps she's referring to the program I started, which is called the Mini Town Hall. Mm-hmm. And what the Mini Town Hall program, which is actually, when I was a selectman back in the 1980s, it's a program I had started then. And I just saw that very successful in bridging the communication between what goes on in town hall and what's out in the neighborhoods. The average person, I think, that has a concern, I don't think the average person is going to take that concern and go to a selectman's meeting, because they might think, well, it's not a major concern and I don't want to go all the way up in town hall. So the idea was, if we could bring town hall to the neighborhoods in a social setting, we can hear what the concerns are that people have in their particular neighborhoods. And sometimes people might think, well, it's a small concern, but if I believe if it's a concern they have, then it's an important concern and it needs to be addressed. People pay taxes in this town. They want to come home and they don't want to be hitting potholes and not having street signs and other issues that. This is where I believe that government can work, and we can address those issues. And so we started in September the Mini Town Hall program, and I went to the first one, which was up on the Pondview Stewart area. And in that home, we probably had 8 or 9 neighbors that were there. And again, just a relaxed, informal, social setting. And I got to hear some concerns that they had about town property that was overgrown. They heard some concerns about at a cul-de-sac that in summer nights kids tended to congregate in that area. Could police come down? And so what I was able to do is go back and meet with the police chief and meet with the Ken Feeney of the Highway Department to see, are there a way we can address these concerns? And then we followed with that. The next month, Mark Fisher went up to Nauset in the Indian Hill area, and he heard about concerns up there. And some of those concerns dealt with the beaver dams that are on Stop River. And what was happening is that the water was backing up and flooding into some of the homes in the neighborhoods in that area. Plus, in the summertime, it was forming pools for mosquitoes and the whole thing with the Triple E and the other issues. So he was able to address some of those concerns. And then in September, October, in November, Selectman Peterson went up into the Hearthstone area up in Belknap and got to talk with the neighbors up there. And then last month in January, I met up at the Harney home up on Maplewood Road and heard about some concerns again, an area of the cul-de-sac that was very much overgrown, some concerns about plowing, snow plowing up at the end of Spruce Way, and a concern on Pine Street that's very narrow about speeding on Pine Street. You know, could we put a cruiser up there to try to look at that? So in addition to the neighborhood concerns, we're also able to just fill in, as we're doing right now, update people what's going on town-wide, especially on issues of the hospital, hear what their views and opinions are. So I just think that's been a great tool, just communication-wise, of trying to get into the neighborhood homes. We had 18 people up at the Harney home that lived in that area, and it gives the selectmen a chance to, not to be on the spot so much, but to hear what the average person who wouldn't take that concern to town meeting.
Max, you see how, as I view this, and I have an opportunity in the mornings to have my coffee and a donut, I sit and I listen to people. And all of a sudden, it dawned on me of what the selectmen are doing, sitting with people and their problems. So I revert that down to another situation, which we talked about earlier with you and with you back, the state hospital. Now those people there are interested in their entities. Well, they should participate because the biggest entity right now, right at this moment, is that special town meeting and to vote. So I reversed that, and I was talking to this lady, and she said, oh, I saw the program with Mr. DeSorgher and the other gentleman, and she said, most definitely I'm going to be there because it's very important. Now, the press, I know, plays a very important part in Medfield. And so we relate to the selectmen, we relate to people, and we turn right around and we relate to the press. Because the press and the television work hand in hand. We all know that. So as Richard was talking about this entity of the Deers and this entity of meetings, what's your opinion? Because you're going to write about it.
So you're asking my opinion about what people are talking about right now. I think honestly, the biggest issue right now is, of course, the state hospital, the future of that. Everyone wants to know what's going to happen to it, and I really expect a packed crowd at town meeting. I think we'll probably set some records with the voter turnout at the special election, should we have one. Aside from that, I think one of the bigger issues people are concerned with right now, I know one issue, of course, is the roads. You know, there's a lot of question about, road repairs happening. I think what people are also concerned about, and this, isn't quite as big, of course, as the hospital, but what's going to happen to, the future of Lourdes, once the Roach Brothers comes in, what it's going to look like. There are people who were, of course, very disappointed to see Lourdes close down. So how that's going to look, and of course the role it's going to play in the town once it's done, that's definitely a big issue as well.
I think maybe just to respond, yeah, I agree. And I think people in Medfield are very excited, I think, about Brothers Marketplace, was the official name.
Oh, yes, well, definitely.
As it's coming in, and the process is still ongoing. They've just received the okay from the Zoning Board of Appeals. I believe they have one more appearance before the Board of Health, and they should be all set. We hope by the end of February all the permits will be out of the way, and they'll be ready to actually get in there. They actually have permission from the building inspector just to begin to do some cleanup things in there right now. So they're actually in there right now, beginning to clean up. And once they get that official okay, they can actually begin their renovation of the store. And it's extensive. It's extensive renovation. that they're going to have to go through, and they're hoping, my understanding is, sometime into June to actually have the opening. And we're working, and I just have a real high opinion of Roach Brothers as a teacher for 35 years, and as a student council advisor and intramural director. Whenever we needed something, if we needed refreshments or something else, we had something going on, we always went to Roach Brothers, and they basically gave you a blank check, whatever you need. I mean, they're just a great community-based organization. And I just want to add to that because we have an aesthetics committee, which it's actually under the umbrella of the planning board. And one of the things they're looking at in downtown Medfield is, for example, sidewalk design.
I was going to ask you about that sidewalk.
Well, what they want to do is, we had a lot of, I'm a very pro-brick person, but as I listen to other people, and part of being, a selectman is, you hear a lot of different opinions and ideas, and sometimes you realize that, maybe that idea that the other person has is a better idea. And as I began to listen, people said if it's all brick, there's some issues, especially with senior citizens and stuff, if the brick, is not even issue, and especially in the wintertime, of falling. It's more expensive. It's harder to plow in the winter. So what the aesthetics committee has come up with that I see in a lot of different communities is a border of brick. And originally we talked about 4 feet. We compromised down to 2, a 2-foot border, which would be very similar if people drive down Pound Street and look along Pound Street. You have that border of the brick that's there. They've just redone Dedham Center, and you have that same kind of brick border. You see that in a lot of different communities. And what we wanted to do, since there's going to be construction taking place in the former Lords block area, is to put that brick sidewalk. Now, there's 5 trees that are in there, and some of those trees that were planted back in 1976, the roots have begun to raise the sidewalk. So we looked, is there a way we could tie in improving the sidewalk, putting the brick in, dressing that area up, and in dealings with the Roach Brothers, they've come forward and they've donated what was our original estimate of what the cost would be to put in that new sidewalk of around $30,000. Roach Brothers has donated $30,000 to the town, to help the town with that project. So this is just another example of, I think, of private, and I think that's the best way for a town to work, private and public working together. And so we're going to go out to bid. The town of Medfield will get the contract, which actually will be 2 contracts for 1 contractor, because part of that sidewalk will be owned by or rented by Roach Brothers, and the other half will be the town of Medfield. So we'll actually have to have two different contracts of private and public. 1 contractor will do that work. The only thing Roach Brothers has asked, and I think it's imperative upon the town of Medfield to make sure we work with them, is that the work be done before they open up. They want to they want to have their opening, and they want everything ready to go. They don't want construction going on, hindering the people trying to come in. And what we'll do is not only in front of the Roach Brothers property, but this sidewalk with the brick will run from the parking lot on South Street, around the corner, past Roach Brothers, past the barber shop and the jewelry store at the end of that block, and will stop where the library entrance begins. Now here's the other issue, and I'll throw this out because I'm worried about it. I'm probably one of the strongest advocates of tree plantings, especially in the downtown area. Maybe it's the past history, seeing so many pictures of the trees that used to be into Medfield Center. Our head of our DPW, the engineer that's looking at that, they've recommended taking down those 5 trees and replanting new trees in their place. And so right away I was very concerned, the loss of those trees, how would that look? So I consulted on the aesthetics committee, just a great person, very knowledgeable arborist, and that's Mike Leaders. So I said, Mike, can you go down and look at those trees? Give me your opinion as to, are they the best trees for that spot? How much more life do those trees have? Because unlike the pictures I see from Medfield in the early 1900s, the trees didn't have the stress then they have today. They're jammed into the sidewalk. You have paved streets, traffic, plows, salt, everything else on those. So he went down, looked at those trees. He said, you probably have about 10 years of life left in those trees. He recommended that this is the time, if you're going to replace those trees, to do it now, rather than 10 years from now have to dig up the sidewalk and that work that goes with. He also said he didn't believe the correct type of trees to have in kind of an urban setting in the downtown, because the roots tend to grow out, the sidewalks are buckling. He's recommended what's called a lilac tree, and I'm not very knowledgeable in that, but it's a type whose roots grow more down. The trunk itself grows up and then out, so that people walking by are not going to get a branch that's in their face. Plus, he said the way that the stores are there, the trees should be spaced so that they're not blocking the signs, especially in the summertime, of the local businesses. So we met with all the businesses that are down there, let them know what we would like to do. And so I'm beginning to come around a little bit that maybe it might be best, if we're going to do this work, to replace those trees. Ken Feeney feels there's money in the existing tree budget to replace those trees that will be put in there. So to me, that was a controversial issue. Others have said it just makes sense to do it now. The trees will be replanted. It will be a better tree for that. I'm not sure how that's going to look when they first make that change. So I had a little bit of a concern on that, but it seems to be those that have the knowledge are saying this is the time to do it when you're doing the construction right now. So it's going to look nice. We've been working very hard. I think the Downtown Study Committee, the Cultural District Committee, the Aesthetics Committee are all looking for ways that we can beautify Medfield. It makes economic sense. Once Roach Brothers comes in, that's going to bring other businesses, I think, that are coming in.
Most definitely.
We've seen Starbucks. We've seen Dunkin' Donuts. We've seen Park Street Books. There's China Sky that's bringing more life into the downtown. Led by the Cultural District Committee, we're having programs such as the First Thursdays. Zulo Gallery, Bill Pope and the Zulo Gallery have done a great job of different programs that are down there. First Parish Church is now doing a Last Mondays series, a series of speakers. Other groups are catching on. It snowballs. Once your center looks good, there's life there. Memo does a great job with the concerts in the summertime, right there in the downtown. We have the farmers market that's now downtown. And so the more we can do to encourage business, that brings us into tax relief as well. And one of the problems Medfield has is we have very little industrial zone land, which was one of the reasons I had some concerns when the 40B project went in on West Street, was the fact that it was going into industrial zone land, and Medfield has very little of that. And rather than having something that's going to be revenue producing and help with the tax rate, we took that away. So I think we have to get creative, and I think Selectman Peterson at the last meeting stated it very well, that we have to get creative of how we can look here and there to help the tax rate in Medfield. We have a number of issues that are coming up, things that we need for the quality of life of Medfield, but unlike a Needham, unlike a Westwood that has a 128, or a Hopkinton that has a 495, we don't have that. So I think we really have to get creative of how can we keep the good quality of life in Medfield, and yet not have a tax rate that's so high that we're going to be driving people, out of the community. And so I think more that we can encourage small businesses, stores that come into Medfield, that's one area that helps. I'm going to begin next Monday, and we've contacted all the selectmen in the bordering towns of Medfield, and for lack of a better name, I'm calling it Informational Services Equipment Sharing Committee. And what my idea is, and I'm going to go to the Millis Selectmen, the Medway Selectmen, the Walpole Selectmen, I'm going to go to their meeting and see if there's a way that we can work together. We have issues that are similar in Millis and in Walpole and in Dover and in Sherburne, yet we work as these separate entities that are in our own little bubble, so to speak. Is there a way that, one, we can share ideas? Maybe there's a better, Walpole or Westwood has a better way of doing something, maybe a better permit process that can make it more business-friendly for a business to come into Medfield. Maybe we can speed up our process. You know, is our process too slow? Now, we have an issue, the town clerk works very hard on this, of trying to collect dog fees. We have over 100 people that have not paid.
No, I've heard that.
The dog fee, well, that money adds up, and it's frustrating. Maybe there's a way that Dover, Sherburne, how do they deal with that issue? We can learn from each other, and that's what I mean by sharing. We have issues of traffic on 109. Westwood has the same issue. Millis and Medway, they have the same issue. How can we work together? So that's one issue of sharing. The second are services. We have a veteran agent. By state law, we're supposed to have a full-time veteran agent. Is there a way, since we're smaller communities, we can team up with another community that would save us some money and give us full-time service? Our tree warden. We have sealers of weights and measures and other things that maybe we could combine with another town, save us some money, get a full-time person, so it would be saving money and getting a better service for our dollar with that. Is there a way we can, share services? The other is equipment. Every town buys, a street sweeper, for example. Is there a way we could share a street sweeper? Maybe we can't. Maybe there's good reasons that we have to have our own. I don't know, but I would like to try to join with the towns and see, how can we share ideas, share services, and share equipment to save money, because we need in Medfield to find some ways to begin to cut down and alleviate the property tax owner here in Medfield, because we have so little industry. 98 whatever percent is all coming off of the property homeowner here in Medfield. So that I'm going to begin that next Monday. I go to Millis, and then the following Monday I go to Medway, and hopefully my idea is that each town will appoint one person to this committee, and that we'll eventually have a committee of maybe 5 to 7 people from the 5 to 7 surrounding towns. When I went to the Mass Municipal Association convention they had in Boston, which was the first time for me, there were selectmen from all over Massachusetts, and I just found it so interesting to sit down next to a selectman from another town and just kind of pick their brain. What do you guys do with this? And you pick up different good ideas. And the other thing I would like to see to come out of this committee, which the Board of Selectmen has endorsed, is maybe once a year to get these 5 to 7 selectmen, town selectmen, to come together in a social setting. Maybe we could use the Dwight Derby House and just meet these other selectmen and get to talk with them and just bounce ideas off of them. So I think that's a way that we can help with the tax issue. I think also Selectman Peterson brought up to put on, and it will be on the annual town meeting, the issue of the local meal tax. Now that came up before in Medfield, now was defeated. I'm not sure how I feel on that. I know Selectman Fisher had some real strong reservations about that. Well, here's another tax. But I think it needs to be brought up, and we need to look. When it first came out, very few towns had the meal tax. It's interesting, the towns around Medfield, and I just looked this up, that have the meal tax right now. And the meal tax is 3/4 of 1%. So that means on a $50 meal, if you spend $50, it will cost you 37 cents. So if you spend $100 on a meal, you're about 74, 75 cents. So are people thinking, well, I'm not going to go to a restaurant in Medfield that has a meal tax because I want to save 37 cents. I'm going to go to Norwood instead, which does not have it. It's going to cost you. I don't think people even know which towns have it or don't have it. And the towns right around Medfield that have it, Bellingham, Dedham, Franklin, Millis, Natick, Needham, Norfolk, Plainville, Stoughton, Sudbury, Walpole, Wayland, Wellesley, Rentham, all have that meal tax. Now, Millis, for example, took in $62,000 last year of revenue. Rentham took in 214,000. Plainville took in $173,000 of revenue. Northborough uses that additional money as property tax relief. It's geared to lower the property tax rate. In Rockland, they use that money to build a new senior center. In the town of Amesbury, they used it for sidewalk expansion. I'd love to see greater sidewalk expansion in Medfield. We just don't have the money for that now. So I think we need discussion on that. Will that be beneficial? Will that actually be a reduction in your property taxes if we went that meal tax? Or is that not something? So I'm looking forward to debate on that. Again, I'm at this point on the fence with that. But I'm looking, the more I see a lot of different advantages with that. So we need to try the best as we can in as many ways as we can to try to work on reducing the tax rate, yet, we need a water tower. The state hospital land is a once-in-a-lifetime, I think, great advantage for the town. So we have a number, the police fire station are coming up. So we have to try to balance the two, I think.
Makes sense. Gentlemen, that old clock on the wall. And consequently, it brings us to a close. But before we close the program, I always ask if there is anything that either one of you gentlemen would like to say before we say good night. So let's start with you, Richard.
Maybe just a couple of things. I'll just follow up on the lady that spoke to you about the mini town halls. One of the things I do, and there's some selfish reasons because I can get exercise out of it, but I walk in different neighborhoods every day, although when it gets real cold or it rains and snows, I'm not very good. But I'm able to kind of walk around in the different neighborhoods, and a number of street signs, potholes, things such as that. We were able to get at CVS, that very narrow opening, we were able to get that widened. That shortcut that went behind Shaw's, which was a huge pothole, we were able to get that fixed. I just think the more I'm a selectman, I just see that town government can work. It really can. It's frustrating sometimes. It's a slow pace. You can't always get everything instantly. But the more you work at it, I think I'm clear that whatever those issues are, we can address those issues here in Medfield. But I just want to give a thank you because I meet once a month with the representatives from the three utilities. And that's NSTAR, Verizon, and Comcast. And part of it was we're working on the removal. Medfield had a very large number, as you know. You guys did a story on that, of the number of double poles that were in Medfield. And we're reducing those that we now feel by springtime, all those poles will be removed from Medfield. Comcast, which they have a chain reaction. So Comcast has to remove their wires first, and then it goes to Verizon, and then NSTAR actually is the one that removes the pole. And Verizon is almost all off of those poles right now. Verizon is working on it. Because of the very cold winter we've had, NSTAR had begun to remove some of those poles. Particularly, we have a real problem on Bridge Street, Fairview, High Street, Main Street. And the ground was so cold that the poles snapped. They snapped off. So we're in a little bit of delay. As soon as the warmer weather, then NSTAR can actually pull the entire pole that's out of the ground. But when I met with the Verizon people, I noticed a couple of things in my walks that on South Street by the intersection of Elm and Knollwood Road, there was a telephone pole that was right in the sidewalk, and one of those large utility boxes was mounted onto the telephone pole at about waist high, making it almost impossible. A kid riding a bike or somebody pushing a baby carriage actually had to go out onto the street. and then the sidewalk plow in the winter has to go out onto the street and then back up onto the sidewalk. So mentioning that, Verizon this past week removed that box and they put it up further into the pole. There was also on South Street and Luffel Lane, there was another one of their utility boxes that someone had spray painted graffiti on. And kind of what I think is the broken window theory. You see one broken window, you're going to get more. If you repair that right away, you're going to prevent that from happening. And so I mentioned that to Verizon, if they could paint over. They went down, that's now been painted over. Now these are small things, but I think they're important to people that they can get into CVS easier, that there's a street sign, on their street, that there's not graffiti on a utility box, that they can safely walk down a sidewalk and not have to go out on the street. This is where I think town government can work, and that's kind of my little parting thought there, so that people have concerns, we can address them. We can't answer all of them, and it might take a long time. We had a couple of neighbors in the north end of town concerned on both Harding Street and Farm Street. As they come by, they go over the railroad tracks, which have gaps, and it's bump, 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 with their car when they go through it. Those are abandoned rails. We were able to go, using our town engineer who had great contact with the MBTA. We just found out last week we've got permission with MBTA to remove those rails. We're in the process now to send a letter to MBTA, and our highway department, which couldn't touch them before, can now remove those rails. We can tar it over. So the guy going home or the lady going home after a long day of work doesn't have to put up with that bump and can make a nice, smooth ride home. It's small, but it's those little things I think that just help.
That always amounts to big things afterwards. Max, what do you have to say?
Well, first, Jack and Richard, thanks so much for having me back. It's been great. It's been great talking to you. I think first off, I do like what you're doing with the mini town halls. I think it's great that you're getting into the town, talking to people, in their homes, in the area about like what is really their concerns. I think the idea for the different committees with people from these surrounding towns is an excellent idea because, you could have a problem, which has been a problem for a while, and the solution could just be right next door. They've had it, they've dealt with it, and it's just a matter of meeting with them and talking to them about it.
Right.
As always, I encourage people if you want to talk to me about a concern you have, a story idea, what have you, you can call me at 781-433-8354. You can also email me at mbowen@wickedlocal.com. I'm always around, and I always respond.
Gentlemen, I thank you very much for sitting at our anchor desk, especially Richard, going into many areas, and to Max. The main issue, as we all know, is that state hospital, and that's got to be taken care of. This is Jack Peterson wishing you and yours the very best. Good night.
This program was made possible through the generous support of your Medfield friends and neighbors, folks just like you. And thanks for watching.